Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great time with this IESA first online vision summit. I'm Vivek Tyagi, and I'm happy to introduce Dr. Siva Sivaram, President, Western Digital Corporation. And Dr. Siva is a 35 years veteran of the semiconductor industry. He has held executive level positions at Intel, Matrix Semiconductor, and SanDisk prior to his current role at Western Digital. He was also the founder and CEO of Twin Creeks Technology, a solar cell and equipment company. Dr. Sivaram is a distinguished alumnus of NIT Trichy from India and serves as a trustee of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where he received his doctoral degree in material science in the US. Dr. Siva also serves on the board of directors of the US India Business Council, which is an arm of US Chamber of Commerce, and on the board of Global Semiconductor Alliance, which is a leading industry group. He's also a chairman of Akshay Patra US Foundation, which is world's largest NGO serving midday meals to over 1.8 million children all over India, and we are all familiar with it. Indian diaspora in the US recently recognized Siva as one of the top 25 business leaders of Indian heritage worldwide. With that being said, I welcome Dr. Siva for his keynote on storage.
Thank you, Vivek. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can, Siva. You can go. You can go ahead, please.
All right. And I hope you can see my screen as well.
Yeah, your slides are visible.
Very good. Today, by the way, this evening is a historic night. I just came back from listening to the daughter of a woman, Indian immigrant in the US, accepting the nomination to run for the vice president of the United States. It's an historic night. I feel proud to come back and talk to you all about some really exciting things that are happening in the data storage world. Digital economy, as you know, is enabled by many things. People talk about the processors and the networking, etc. Except digital economy is driven by data, and data needs storage. Data storage and the evolution of data storage has been the enabler of the digital economy. And this continues to progress because some stupendous progress that's been happening in the scaling of these data storage technologies. I want to talk to you about how excited I am about this, and I want to show you what is happening in the world of data storage. I have to put this up. I'm sorry, you have to read some legalese ahead of what I'm going to say. Western Digital, where I come from, Western Digital, the company that I represent, is the leader in data infrastructure in the world. Given the breadth of portfolio in hard drives and solid state drives and flash, and with over 14,000 patents operating in 175 countries, selling products at over 400,000 storefronts around the world, with brands that you all recognize: SanDisk, WD, Western Digital, WD Black. I often make this point. We store about 40% of the world's data. Let me repeat that. If you take a picture of yourself and posted it on Facebook, half your face will be on a Western Digital device. Of course, the better looking half will be on Western Digital device. That's how ubiquitous Western Digital is. Now, when we talk about this amount of data, let me give you an example of what is going on in the world of data. All of you recognize these logos. These particular 12 logos represents 12 applications with more than 5 billion downloads. 5 billion downloads. You know how many people are in the world? Less than 10 billion people are there in the world. Each of these has been downloaded 5 billion times. On top of those, these 37 applications have been downloaded more than 1 billion times. You know what that means? Each one of them is producing enormous amount of data. I have my WhatsApp account, and every morning somebody from India will send me a beautiful picture saying good morning. These are copied, these are sent around. What this does in the end is a huge acceleration in data creation. I want to give you an example of this. Either it is on your cell phone, on your connected devices, on your videos, data center, automotive, cars, everywhere. In 2019, 45 zettabytes of data were created. Zettabytes. In 2024, that number becomes 143 zettabytes. We call this the zettabytes age. I know I keep repeating the word zettabyte. I just don't know if you know what a zettabyte is. A zettabyte is, you can count it, there are 21 zeros. Into the 21 bytes. And I know it does not make any sense what 10 to the 21 is. 10 to the 21 is approximately the number of stars in the entire universe. That's 1 zettabyte. And we are expecting to produce over 100 zettabytes of data that we need to figure out how to store. Currently, all the 43 zettabytes are not stored and mined. We store a fraction of it because of the cost. Now, in the end, people tell you when you produce the data, it is all stored in the cloud. It's a very nice thing to say. Clearly, it is not stored in some cloud, it is stored in the cloud. What does that mean? You think in terms of, hey, it is stored in a big data center. But ultimately, every bit, every byte in the end has to be physically stored in a bit that flips somewhere. A switch has to flip somewhere to store that piece of data. And imagine now having the requirement to store 10 to the 21, 1 zettabyte. And then now having the ability to store 143 zettabytes in the future. That is the challenge we have in our hands. So you can sort of start to think of it, yes, I have to switch a bit. When you think of it, you think in terms of where does this get stored? Of course, it gets stored in a huge data center. And people talk about in a data center, we talk about how there's a lot of computing, there's a lot of networking, but 80% of a data center's capacity is storage servers. 80% of a cloud data center's capacity is storage servers. The 10 to the 21 zettabytes, 100 of those, 100 times 10 to the 21 zettabytes, have to be stored eventually in a data center where most of it is stored. And this is where we come in. Normally, when you think of it, people think, they're probably DRAMs, the memory that it's stored. And DRAM shipments, as you can see, have been soaring over the last 25 years, 30 years. DRAM has been in use for the last 50 years. Over the last 10 years, it's been dramatically growing to almost 50 exabytes. Exabyte is 1,000th of a zettabyte. Seems like a big number. Till you compare that to NAND. NAND, this is growing dramatically compared to what a DRAM has been. And on top of it is the hard drive storage. Between NAND and hard drive shipments, there is almost 70 times the volatile storage of DRAM. This is the kind of growth we are seeing. And you can see this is still a small amount because a lot of it is because it is not stored. The data is not stored. This is only the stored amount of data. So we need a lot more of this to store the huge influx of data that is coming out. And that storage growth is universally growing everywhere, whether it is in the data centers, in your PCs, in your tablets, in your cell phones, in the edge device, in cards, in USBs, wherever you can store them. But this growth is not uniform. You can see how big, where you see 200 exabytes of growth in cards and USB, 10 times, 15 times of that is growing in the data center. Data center is where the explosion of data is happening. The cloud data centers are being buried in a flood of data. And we have to develop the technologies to store every bit of this data and provide it back to you securely when you need it. All right, let's move from here to see, so what? What do we do? So in the olden days, when you have to store this data, it used to be in three simple tiers. And the top tier is the lowest latency flash. In the middle tier, longer latency. When you say shorter latency of the order of microseconds, in the longer latency of the order of several milliseconds, and then of the order of several tens of seconds. That's how data used to be, either in tape, hard drive, or flash. Easy, we know where they were going. Unfortunately, or fortunately for all of us, this is not a simple world. The applications are ballooning, applications are diversifying, applications are demanding. A data analytics application is very different than a real-time application. It is different than what you need to carry in your hand in mobility. It is very different than an inference engine or a training engine or an IoT device. So which means the memory and the storage needs are so divergent. If I'm in a real-time application, latency is important. If I'm a mobile device, I need to have low power. You may need sometimes to store it for years. You may have to store it at extremely low cost, or you may want to write it over and over again, or you want to have very high density. Each of them requires a slightly different storage medium, and you end up with a diversification. Those walls between those three simple tiers got broken. Even hard drives, there's faster ones, the slower ones, high IOPS, low IOPS. In flash, very fast flash, or cross-point devices, new storage class devices, and there's main memories. This has become a very, very, very complicated stack, each of them having a large volume of business going. Western Digital has devices that span this entire spectrum of needs. In the core of all this are the two major devices, flash and hard drives. In both of them, the idea, the basic fundamental property is you need to scale. You need to produce more bits for less cost, more bits for less area, more bits for less power. That's the name of the game. You need to scale. The higher the density, the better it is. So on one side, you have NAND and SSDs. On the other side, you have hard disk drives. And there's a lot of give and take between those two. And in each of them, there are unique parameters that are optimized for their use. In NAND, you scale on the X, Y, Z directions. When people tell you Moore's law is dying, don't believe them. In flash, it is thriving. It's moving faster than Moore. Surprisingly, hard drives, mechanical devices, the world's most complicated mechanical devices, continue to scale. In your computer, when you look at your PC, there are only two things now move: a hard drive and a fan that might be there in some computers to cool. Other than that, everything else is going solid state. These hard drives, of course, continue to scale and become the most reliable, cheapest, long-standing, high-density storage devices. And they are driven by how much you can store per disk and how fast you can recover that data. Let me take you into the details of both of those. What are those technologies that are making this possible? Let's start with NAND first. This is a picture I never tire of storing. I came to this forum in 2013 or 2014 to talk. At that time, we used to be able to store on plain sheets of silicon. On a silicon wafer, we had two-dimensional devices. Since that time, in the last 5 years, we have built massive skyscrapers. We've gone from 48-story to a 64-story to today, over 112-story buildings are being built. Literally, look at those 112-story. There are these big elevator shafts in the middle. You can see them. They're called memory holes. Every time the memory hole stops on one of those floors, out pop the bits. The bit is stored at that. There may be 1, 2, 3, 4 bits stored in there. And you got to be able to take those bits up and down that elevator shaft. And this scaling, when you take an XY scaling on the surface of the wafer and then multiply by these 112 layers, you produce the number of bits that are needed to store those 10 to the 21 bits that you need to store. This vertical scaling has been a dramatic development. There is no analog to this in any other semiconductor processing. Whether it is processors, whether it is DRAM, nothing like it. The scale at which it is going, it is faster than more, is more than more, and there is no end to it. So when somebody tells you, oh, Moore's law is slowing down, show them a flash picture. Flash in volume, density, and in scale continues to be a Moore's law, more than Moore's law scale. I just want to show you some pictures of how this looks. Those elevator holes I talked about, the ones that in red on top you see, there is 1 trillion of them in every wafer, 1 trillion or more in every wafer. And these trillion holes, look at how deep they go. When they go from those trillion holes, they go all the way straight down over 112 layers. That just is mind-bogglingly deep that we are able to drill those aspect ratio holes. We don't obviously drill them. We drill them with very, very sophisticated semiconductor processes. Nobody talks to you about them. These are today the most advanced processes anywhere in the world. And with those 112 layers and 1 trillion holes on top, then you go in there and say, okay, you do it one generation, next generation you shrink them further, make those holes get closer, make those holes smaller, make those holes more vertical, and keep scaling them. So you do the lateral scaling and the lateral scale, and then you multiply by the height, you end up with the density that you need. And that's not enough. You now have to figure out how to not store 1 bit at each one of those on the floors where the elevator stops, in that little hotel room at the front of each elevator shaft. You don't just store 1 bit. You don't just store 2 bits, which is just a 0 or a 1. You don't just store 3 bits. Now we are shipping in volume 4 bits per cell, which means I got to be able to distinguish 16 states. 0001, 00011, 0111, etc. 16 such states have to be distinguished. That's how sophisticated the logical scaling is. Together, lateral scaling, vertical scaling, logical scaling provides that volume of flash. Okay, now that's the flash scaling that's happening and where we are leading and providing products for data storage. This is not enough. We need even cheaper storage in higher densities. Digital twin for that is the hard disk, where you have on the left a data center SSD, a device that just looks just like it, but inside nothing at all similar is the hard disk drive. The product we are shipping today, an 18 terabyte hard drive. For those of you who are old enough, you might remember the 4 megabyte drives that you used to buy. Remember those little floppy drives that you used to have? This is 18 terabyte, not 18 gigabyte. It is 18 terabyte, 1 million times more than what you used to buy when you started on your PCs in the 80s. How do these hard drives work now? The hard drives, as I said, are one of the most complicated, sophisticated mechanical devices ever built by mankind. Those disks are rotating at thousands of RPM. They are packed so tight in 1 inch. These days, you can have 9, 10 disks in 1 inch, separated by the space to have those sensors, those little arms that go in and sense the data. That heads that are sensing are flying on top of it. It's like flying a 747 at 5 feet above the surface and flying across India. That's how sophisticated that is. And that 100 read-write operations per second that needs to be written with that. This is a device that if somebody had not seen it, would not believe it exists. And what makes that happen is an idea called, we all have dilemma. A dilemma is when you have a problem that I have. We have a trilemma. A trilemma is a challenge of HDD scale. I need to have bits that are written on those disks that don't flip by themselves. They are thermally stable. They are still written as densely as possible so they don't interfere with each other. And I'm still able to write it hard enough that they stay. This is a difficult balancing act. The difficult balancing act of making all these three. I'm able to write, it is still thermally stable, and I'm writing in a small dot possible. We now use this idea of energy assisted perpendicular magnetic recording. I know that's a mouthful, but the idea is even more complicated. As you write, either a laser or a microwave, you spot heat where you want to write, program it, and then quench it. This has been a breakthrough technology that is allowing us, the energy enhanced PMR is allowing us to ship 18 terabyte. Now, I can write the 18 terabyte. How do I read it? How do I read on top of it? Or even how do I write at the precise place? What we call suspension technologies, where I have multi-stage, very, very sophisticated mechanical arms. I'm showing this only to show the stage on this actuator. You can't move the momentum is very large if you have the large inertia on the whole thing. So you need to be able to move the big piece first, small piece second, and the tip alone third with little piezoelectric controllers with servo motors controlling it so that you can get the number of 1,000 tracks per inch into it so that I can get that data into that device. And on top of all of this mechanical device, the most interesting thing is this idea of helium-filled drives. If I just have air with oxygen and nitrogen, these disks flutter. These disks move up and down on the edge. I cannot go and pack them close enough. What do? We fill them with helium. That helium, the low density gas that sits there, allows these disks to rotate without flutter, without the motor drag. Extremely thin platters allows that disks to rotate in a consistent fashion that you end up producing very, very, very high density drives. So you just got to hear me describe the two sides of it. On the flash, solid state innovation, Moore's law, pushing more than Moore's law. On the other side, a mechanical device that's again scaling as fast as the solid state is doing, with enormously interesting magnetic recording technologies, mechanical servos, suspension technologies, filling it with helium, and new writing technologies all put together. This is what allows you to fit that 10 to the 21 bytes of data to be written, and that flood of data that is coming in still be recorded and be accessed securely when you want it again. I show an armadillo. Armadillo, as you can see, is full of scales. If you don't scale, that would have perished. And the two I'm showing on the other side is the hard drive and this SanDisk 1 terabyte micro SD card, which was designed and productized and marketing in Bangalore. The guys in Bangalore have done an amazing job for Western Digital to come back and get this drive to work. Bangalore is where we make all of our consumer products and many of our hard drive products and our mobile products out of there. The technology development happens there. These technology innovations are what continue to drive the scale. And scale is what is needed to store all these bits. And the ability to store and access those bits is what allows the cloud to exist. The cloud is driving the digital economy that India so desperately needs and is moving very fast towards. Western Digital, of course, is at the forefront of it. We are participating in all tiers of the storage, whether it is hard drive, whether it is flash, whether it is extremely low latency flash, very high end of it, very low end of it, we continue to participate at all levels of this innovation. Continuous technology innovation is driving this data storage. We're doubling the densities every 18 months, just like Gordon Moore would have predicted, both in hard drive and in flash. And we end up delivering the right cost of ownership of the product. In the end, you need to be able to store those products, store that data, and retrieve that data in a secure fashion. Technology leadership is what is needed for the digital. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shivaram. Uh, can you hear me well?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That was a very detailed and glad to see your emphasis on not just the Moore's law, but where the memory is moving. There are a couple of questions, and I want to put it forward for you. The first question is asked by Tarundeep. What's your view on the storage class memory and the in-memory compute?
Right. Both storage class memory and in-memory computing are slightly different themes on the same concept. The in-memory compute, near compute memory, and the variations and all of those are a evolving class that we think are going to be extraordinarily important in the future. But we think about it in a slightly different fashion than a normal storage class memory people would think of. Our primary focus is moving compute close to the data as opposed to moving the data close to the compute. The volume of data has become so high that our job is to make sure we are not unnecessarily moving the data up and down. Moving data is very energy intensive. So what we would like to do in the in-memory computing that we would love to do is storage appliances where we compute most of the basic functions so that we move it back to the processor for higher order computing needs. What we call computational storage. The computational storage idea is to make sure that we have very fast compute very, very close to the data. Now, storage class memory does it in the reverse. Let's go replace DRAM with higher densities right next to the processor so the processor can access the data set directly. Both are big evolving subjects. Both are limited by new memory classes that need to come up. The current phase change memory that is proposed in our minds is not a very scalable solution. They are there today. For the longer term, we don't believe phase change memory will continue to scale. We believe there are other technologies that are coming up, evolving, that would be better suited for the storage class memory solution. And the computational storage solutions, we have ideas and appliances and devices that we would be introducing ourselves.
True. And then actually the second question is continuation, which you actually, I think, started answering, is the next question asked by Sumit, which he says, with low latency cloud storage, which is few milliseconds away from the client devices, do you think the personal storage markets like the USB drive, the portable SDD, etc., will they grow in future?
It's a very interesting question. What you see is that they both grow. Clearly, the growth in the cloud far outstrips the need for personal storage. However, what we do see, I will take the example of a video monitoring device. The traditional model would say that from the camera, you want to get all the data as quickly as possible to a PVR or a network attached video drive, and then transfer the data to a cloud data center. What we now see, the better way to do it is, given how fast the cost of storage has come down and how fast the cost of compute has come down, we can have artificial intelligence devices on the endpoint cameras themselves and enough storage there so that only the metadata gets transferred back to the cloud. Local storage takes care of this. This allows us to distribute the data so that we don't transfer across the network huge amount of data. So I know the question was in terms of hard drive, USBs and cards. I'm actually talking about edge devices having sufficient storage and intelligence to go with it. So edge storage actually is continuing to be a dramatic growth story for us.
True. And then just to finish it, I think, Dr. Sivaram, you spoke about the storage, the processing, the movement that we need to do. Any quick thoughts on security now when we are doing all of this?
I'm glad you asked the question. I would have brought it up even if you had not. Privacy and security are two words that you're going to hear a lot more of everywhere with respect to data. If I'm an individual user, I want to have privacy to my data, and privacy is not possible without the data being secure. Personal data and in storage in data centers and cloud, both at the point of production, at the transmission, and at the storage, we have to be particularly careful about the privacy and security of the data. We are now starting to think about solutions that encrypt the data at the production and allow only decrypting by the owner with the personal keys. These things have become the root of trust that we need to set up for them have become very sophisticated. We participate in open source ideas for this. This is an area that is not going to end. There is always going to be sophisticated hackers, and we have to become more sophisticated. And we think that security and privacy and data protection are of prime importance in the production, transmission, and storage of data. I think, Naveen, you are muted still.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sivaram, for taking time to share your thoughts as well as answering those questions. In the benefit of time, we would like to move forward while there were more questions. But at this time, I would like to take a minute to, on behalf of ISA Vision Summit team, thank you so much for your thoughts and time.